Guys, what is up? Welcome back to Foresight Paradigm. It has been a while since I've done a proper discussion video on this channel. Jason Sylvester, who joined me for several videos back when I was more active on here. Hey, Jason, how you doing?
Good. Thanks for having me, Landon. How are you?
Pretty good. Thanks for being on. So, Jason, you're still in Thailand. How is it? How is it going there? How are things?
It's really hot right now. It's April is the hottest month, so it's in Celsius. We're up in the with the heat index. We're up in the low 40s, so it's pretty brutal. So I like to just stay inside with the air conditioning and work on my videos and my books. So just it's a good excuse not to go
Well,
outside.
you right. You did start a channel yourself, very history based. I think it's called the
Yes.
Sylvester Report.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Sylvester report. I'm doing short summaries of the history that I'm writing about. So doing a history of secularism, how basically how the world became secular. So
I've seen several of them. They're really good.
oh, thanks.
I
Appreciate
remember the series you had on Peterson, specifically.
that.
That was pretty amusing, and yeah, that's the
Yeah.
whole thing,
Lots of negative
right?
comments from his fans. So, but to be expected.
Yeah, right, right. How are things like as far as politically and religiously in Thailand? Just out of curiosity, compared to in the West.
Religion's not that much of an issue here. I mean, there's a little bit where it creeps into the social sphere. There's a powerful Buddhist monastery. Excuse me. Uh, um, they have quite a lot of clout in the country. So things like on certain holidays, you can't buy alcohol because like I guess it's offensive to Buddhists. So there's certain days that are dry. But other than that, the religion doesn't really play a too big of a role in society. Like I mean, there are some very devout Buddhists here. They have, I think it's called a spirit house. It's like a little mini temple, and it sits like in the front yard of people's houses, and you'll see quite often you'll see like as people walk by, like they'll kind of bow to it. So but politically, the religion's not like it's not like the U.S. Politically, as people know, there was a coup. I think it was 2014. There was a military coup, and then they had an election where there was a big landslide victory for one of the Democratic parties. But then, like the government junta has rigged the the approvals process for appointing like the prime minister. So it's kind of messed up that way. But I mean, at least
Yeah.
they have elections, but whether it's yeah, I mean, the messed up election is for you guys with the orange super liar.
I can't even get in it right now. Um, yeah, it's interesting. I know many Buddhist sects don't really have any kind of deity. Um, it makes you wonder why all the people born in Thailand, I think it's like 95% Buddhist. Why, what did they do wrong with, the God of the Bible to be damned, just being in the wrong, country. And anyway,
That's a very
um,
Christian perspective though, but it's not, it's like it's funny like how in
I,
Asia they have the whole concept of face and like, oh, you've lost face. I'm like, well, in your mind I've lost face, but I'm a Westerner. I haven't lost it, I'm not shamed by anything. So it's kind of funny. So like
and just kind of like a sign of disrespect. You've done something shameful or,
no, like if you it's considered impolite to point out like if somebody has like made a mistake, like if they like, and that's one of the big problems in Asia that I've experienced as a project manager in my professional life. It's very hard to get in certain cultures to that they would admit that they don't know something or that they've made a mistake. Like they just soldier on like nothing has happened, so things don't get addressed. So that's a big problem. Um, but if you call it out, Like they say, oh, you've lost face, because you called something out. I'm like, yeah, well, in your mentality, I've lost face, but in my mind, I'm perfectly okay. So so
Right.
so when if a Christian thinks
Okay.
that the Buddhists are damned, that's the damned in the Christian's mind, but the Buddhists don't give a shit. So
Right, of course. Yeah. Maybe if they could back up something that they're saying, they might give a shit. Uh, all right. Well, we're going to cover a few topics today that I have kind of been into recently. That to be fun to discuss. Touch on the logic or illogic of the Easter story. There was Easter recently. Gonna touch on a little bit of cosmology, the nature of time, which I've always found to be the most fascinating part of the universe for me. And if the universe had a beginning, kind of tie those together, and also touch a little bit on free will. Um, so yeah, I mean, let's get into it. Hey,
sure.
Jason, what are some of the problems with the Easter story?
Okay. Just bringing up the article I did the other day, or I did it a few years ago, but I reposted it for Easter. Um, so just looking here, so all four of the gospel stories, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, their description of the resurrection does not match. Every single story is different. So Mark originally ended. There's an add-on to the end of Mark that maybe a lot of people, both Christians and non-Christians, probably aren't aware of. I mean, I wasn't aware of this until maybe 10, 15 years ago. That the last 8 verses of the book of Mark are not original. They were tacked on to the end to try to synchronize the gospel stories of the resurrection. So Mark 16:8 ends with the women fleeing in terror. They go to see the tomb and it's empty, and they flee in terror and tell no one. Um, Also, the difference is, what do they see? Like each one is different. Like, do they see an angel? Do they see one man, two man? Like, it's every single gospel story is completely different. They don't line up at all. Um, Let me just back up a little bit. Da, 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 da.
Those are
Yeah,
issues,
yeah. So, like in
but
John,
I
so it
mean
says,
more like like the pure logic of
"Oh,
the
okay, yeah."
entire
I mean,
story.
it's
But
it's
you can go
it's
ahead. I mean,
obviously,
people may
yeah. I
not
mean,
know
it's
this that might come across it. So
Yeah, I mean, like logically, yeah, it's kind of silly. I mean, no one has ever come back from the dead, especially after 3 days. Like maybe somebody's been down for like 30 seconds or a few minutes and they're revived by modern medical science, but no one's been dead for 3 days and come back to life. So it's obviously fan fiction, to put it that way. The uh, there's just no there's just no way it could have happened. And as I said, each of the resurrection stories is completely different in each of the gospels. So, like, if Mark is true, and it was the first gospel to be written, and if it's true that the woman fled and said nothing, then what's the point? Like, how did Christianity spread if they didn't say anything? So, um, my hypothesis. Um, I actually wrote a screenplay on the historical Jesus a few years ago. Every
oh
movie that's
wow.
it's been that's been about Jesus has been like, the Mel Gibson's. Like, it's been all the very theologically infused. Nobody has actually told the story um, of the historical Jesus that biblical scholars talk about, like, the end times preacher who's preaching the kingdom in their lifetimes. Um, and one of the ideas I put into the script was, in Aramaic, the name Thomas means twin. So in early Christian lore, there were stories of Jesus having a twin brother. So in the screenplay that I did, to explain the post crucifixion sightings of Jesus, I'm like, it was his twin brother. That's who everybody saw. So, that's a much more
Mhm.
logical uh, explanation for what happened. So if Judas Thomas was Jesus's twin brother, and as early tradition states he had a twin brother, that would make a hell of a lot more sense than a resurrection of someone who's been dead for 3 days, which obviously we know can't happen.
Yeah. Yeah, and they talk about every one of their arguments is just ridiculous. I mean, it fails so hard. And you can go on for days. There's so many channels that deal with it. They can, rip it to shreds. The manuscripts. Oh, there's a lot of manuscripts, but they've all been altered. They're all like way later, and all kinds of stuff. But I did a list just logically, like, and I got these from a couple places, but the things I thought of too. Just running down them. First off, the story is not original. We have even going back to like ancient uh, Mesopotamia with the story of Inanna, the goddess who went down to the underworld and was, nailed up and rose again after three, like a savior figure. You even get something like that in Zoroastrianism. I think their savior figure is Sayo Shiant or something. But the list. Some of them are not valid, but so many of them are. That's first off, and it was very common in the area, around when Christianity arose. And we had like 300 years before that, Alexander the Great spreading Hellenistic culture all through that area, right? So, you know, it's it's not original. Anything
Yeah,
is pretty much
let's.
original in the Bible.
Yeah, there's a lot
Sorry.
of those the dying and
That
rising gods. So there a lot of
yeah,
people
yeah.
have made the,
Yeah.
the parallels between like Horus and Osiris and Ahura Mazda or whoever they are. I can't remember all the different names. And I actually looked into that like over 10 years ago, and I actually couldn't find the parallels that people talk. And I've seen other articles,
Mhm.
scholarly articles on the fact that yeah, these comparisons that all of these gods were born, on the 25th, and Doubt died and rose after 3 days. Like that's like an urban legend that it's not really true. So, I mean, there's a little bit
Yeah.
of overlap, but not as much as some people make it out to be. Like Bill Maher talks about it in his movie Religulous, and it's just I could not find any of the similarities that they talked about. And then, as I said,
Yeah.
I've seen articles since then that says like it's basically not true. So, but yeah, I
Yeah,
mean,
like I said,
there
there
are,
definitely is
yeah,
definitely some are not valid, but I mean, like I think Richard Carrier gets into this and some other people. A book called History Begins at Sumer, for example, that is kind of a classic in that field from I think the 80s or 50s or something. It talks about Inanna, for example, like super old and not really completely valid. And I think Mithras, there's some aspects in it, but not others. Yeah, I mean, there's definitely the general thing about mystery cults, dying and rising, baptism. Uh,
virgin births.
it kind of yeah, yeah, they were in the air and the culture around them. But also think about Easter. Why wouldn't God love his creations, right? And this narrative, he made us supposedly, and we're the peak of the creation, right? So, why wouldn't he? That's one thing. It's also kind of a slave mentality. Like we're not worthy, et cetera, et cetera. It's kind of like an abusive relationship if you think about it. Um,
Yeah. There's a good quote from Joseph Campbell. And back in the late 80s. He did the Power of Myth
right.
documentary with Bill Moyers. And
Yeah.
he's got a great quote about the fall of mankind, the garden narrative. And he says like that myth corrupts the whole world for us. Everything is sinful, every inclination is to be repressed, and it shapes your whole mindset. And like that's kind of a shitty inheritance for a lot of people, to think that your nature is fallen rather than being part of nature. We're somehow outside of nature and evil and sinful. It's a messed up, very, very messed up idea.
Which is also very illogical in so many ways for being how he made them and how he knew they were going to be, right? And it's a story that kind of damns the pursuit of knowledge, which is the lifeblood of all progress. And it also kind of it's full of misogyny, which propagated misogyny for millennia. Thing is undercuts itself, right? I mean, people do actually sacrifice their lives and don't come back after a weekend, uh, for other people. So, and also why did this blood magic, this primitive blood magic have to occur? Human sacrifice. If we did something, why couldn't God he made the whole situation? Why couldn't he, make it so there wasn't any need for anything to begin with, or if there is, you know, you preach forgiveness, forgive somebody. The obviously the illogic of, killing yourself, sacrificing yourself to yourself to save your creations from yourself, creating a loophole for your own rules that you made, et cetera, et cetera. A whole other thing, right? So, um, also this thing about Jesus, God experienced human life as a human, right? Well, he didn't really. He a full life, and he didn't have all the gamut of experiences that people have. Considering all cultures too throughout time and the progression of technology. So that thing, it doesn't stand up. You could keep going on and on. Send a book. A book necessarily entails translation, all books, interpretation. So, this God did not foresee that, like, people were going to create thousands of different sects. Why can't you? Wise people are clear, right? And this is like your supposed instruction manual for salvation, like the most important thing, and it's this problematic. So for some reason, Easter, like movies on like exorcism just kind of offend me. I don't know. Other things not so much, but it's just something about it. It's kind of just distasteful and so ridiculous to me. I don't know. But
Yeah. I mean, it's
last
more
last
more
thing here, real
distasteful to people who nail themselves to a cross out of their own devotion. I mean, that's just twisted.
about, like, historically, people didn't get this message until 1492 in the Western Hemisphere, right? And I think there's probably people in Thailand that still haven't got the message, and many others have, and like they don't care. They're not convinced by it, right? So that's another thing.
Yeah.
You studied about cosmology, about like the beginning of the universe and things of that nature.
Well, I've I've always been an astronomy geek. Even as a little kid, I've just been fascinated by the stars in the universe. So, and I took astronomy as an elective in university. So I'm fairly knowledgeable about the Big Bang and cosmology and how the universe evolved. There's an interesting thing I read within the last year or two. I guess scientists are trying to rethink the Big Bang, and they're saying, like, like time zero begins at the Big Bang, and this article was saying no, that there wasn't actually a beginning, that there was a, we all know that E equals mc squared, right? So mass, energy equals matter. That there was like just this energy field permeating like whatever medium was there, and then at whatever time zero of the Big Bang, 13.8 billion years ago, thereabouts, the energy spontaneously converts to matter. But that there was, a t minus one prior to that event, and like who knows how long that energy field was propagating throughout its medium before the matter converted itself to matter. So it's an interesting concept that kind of explains away, like, what happens before the beginning of time in the universe. So, and I like, it's elegant to me. It's very elegant that there's just an energy field that could have been infinite, prior to the counting down time from the start of a material universe.
Yeah, I wrote a as or something rather than nothing several years ago that you edited on uh, Atheist Alliance International. But yeah, I think most physicists are the universe is likely eternal. Um, there's several different models of it. One of them that I found interesting is like, because the fundamental laws of physics do not, and supposedly like time is reversible, and the only thing that is connected in law is not like prescriptive. The laws of science are descriptive. They describe patterns of space time, right? But anyway, like the arrow of time and entropy and the increase of entropy, which is also not fundamental, is the reason for our arrow of time. But like you could have a universe where like the Big Bang is like in the middle and it's the big bounce. And so like we're going one direction, on the other side of that, another universe is going another direction. and their future is where their entropy is increasing. And so, that's for them. They're kind of, it's like a mirror image with the Big Bang in the middle, the Big Bounce, which is different kinds of
Yeah,
multiverses. We could be a fluctuation from an eternal multiverse potentially,
yeah. I mean, like, who
as
knows?
well.
Like, maybe like the matter going into a black hole is spurting out the other side and creating new universes. So there's all kinds
Hmm.
of theories. I mean, like, I hope we're still alive, like, for the next major scientific discovery. I think that would be really, really cool. I actually wanted to be an astrophysicist when I was a kid, but I'm suck at math. I mean, I'm okay with
Yeah,
like
yeah, yeah.
basic calculus and algebra, but like complex, higher order mathematics, just phew. But like, I can do basic calculus
Yeah.
and algebra, but beyond that, yeah. So I kind of gave up on that dream of being an astrophysicist. But I don't really listen to podcasts except Star Talk with Neil deGrasse Tyson. That's the only podcast I really listen to, and occasionally I'll
Mhm.
listen to some other ones, but as a regular thing, like Star Talk's the only one I'm really interested in, just because physics and astronomy, I just find it just infinitely fascinating. And there's a great quote from Richard Dawkins talking about the young Earth creationists and saying, like, the young Earth creationist view compared to what really happened is boring. Like, the science of the Big Bang, of people who don't know what nucleosynthesis is. That's the term. So the building up of heavier and heavier atoms in the fusion of a stellar nursery. It's just fascinating. It's really, really cool. So, like, to gaze and wonder at the universe. I mean, like, who needs religion and some idiotic campfire story from years ago, like from goat herders? Like, sorry, it doesn't captivate the attention the way that the real science does. So
Yeah, those stories are very Earth centric. And I had a book that I wrote years ago, and I made the comparison of like it's the dirt of the Near East versus the vastness of the cosmos, right? I mean, it's so obviously the product of that time and geography on this little ball. Um, Sean Carroll is his book, The Big Picture. I think is the best science book ever written, the best big picture science book. And if you haven't ever checked that out, definitely do. I bought a book of his though recently that really digs into what you were mentioning, the equations, and I still have not been able to get into it really because the math. Yeah, like I don't know, it's a bit too much. Hopefully, eventually, I'll finally be able to really dig into it. And you know how you can read lines of books without really absorbing what. So I want to try to absorb that as much as possible. Um, but another book that I read recently is this one. It's all about time. If you can see it, it's by an Italian guy. It's called The Order of Time. And then Carroll has another book all about time, The Best Theory of Time too. So if you're looking at books about time, those are good. It stops. We have eternalism and presentism. So some people think the present is the only thing that's really real, right? And past and future are not. And then other people think eternalism kind of like a block and they all exist simultaneously. And thinking about that, the past, we don't really know. There's things about time we definitely don't know.
the for the people who don't know, your viewers watching, so I'm actually writing a book on the history of secularism, and basically charting the arguments that are made by people throughout history, and then how, like, somebody wrote something that influenced somebody else, who influenced somebody else, and then this person got in trouble, but they influenced that person. So I start with classical antiquity and what were the ancient Greeks and Romans saying that then got rediscovered in the Renaissance. And when in 1085, I believe it was 1085, that's when Toledo, the Muslim ruler of Toledo, surrendered the city to a Christian king, and they discovered the Islamic libraries. They're just full of not only the Islamic Golden Age science and mathematics and astronomy, but basically the collected works of the ancient Greeks that had been lost in Western Europe. And one of the
Right.
points so the Catholic Church did not want Aristotle taught. So the people who know that, like, basically Thomas Aquinas used Aristotelian logic to formulate his Summa. But prior to that, for probably less than 100 years, like between like 1220 and 1270, so about maybe 50 years. The Bishop of Paris had essentially banned the teaching of Aristotle at the Sorbonne, the French theological school. And
Right.
one of the reasons why Aristotle was not taught, or why the Catholic Church had a problem with Aristotle, was because he and other ancient Greeks believed that the universe was eternal. Well, if the universe is eternal, then there's no creation, six-day creation. Um,
Hmm.
and Aristotle also in the, I think it's the Anima, um, Aristotle also talks about, like, there's a universal soul. So if there's a universal soul and there's no beginning, then all of this contradicts, Christian doctrine. So that's one of the reasons why
Aristotle
Aristotle
too,
was
yeah.
banned.
Aristotle had the argument of the prime mover, but like something had to start, things have to push things, right? And now we know from like I think it's the conservation of momentum, that actually the natural state of things is motion, and things don't really stop going unless they're acted upon by something like friction. So that's not really the natural state of things. Things keep going. And also you think about cause, like David Hume pointed this out, we don't really know, we can't really prove cause or exactly say what the exact fundamental nature of cause is. Also, cause is not in the fundamental like laws of physics either. Time is reversible and it's not really there except for with entropy and heat. But also like cause is not there. We just see things, cause seems, cause in a certain way, and things typically precede other things, but like you can't prove what cause is, right? And when we get to quantum physics, it's cause is like matter and antimatter annihilate and reappear. I think photons get ejected from things without any apparent cause. So, in science, things tend to not intuitively easy to understand, or they don't make intuitive sense. And if you think about it, that kind of makes sense, because like why would they? We didn't need to like appreciate the very fast, the very small, the very big to survive, in our evolutionary history. So
Yeah, yeah. Aristotle was there's a good, what's the name? I can't remember the name of it, but there's a famous painting by Raphael. The School of Athens, the School of Athens by Raphael. If people want to go Google it, and right in the center background are Aristotle and Plato. And Plato's pointing to the heavens, and Aristotle is pointing to the earth, because Plato was very theistic, and Aristotle was much more. I mean, he talked about a
right.
prime mover, but the prime mover basically just kicks things in motions, and then he's not involved. And that's one of the things about Greek. If you look at Greek uh, conceptions of deities, people like Democritus, Epicurus, yeah, they believe in gods, but they're just part of the universe. They're part of nature. They're not outside of nature, and they're certainly not interested in humanity. So,
Yeah. Yeah. Another thing is relativity with Einstein, how in the presence of mass, time slows down, and also with speed. When you get to high speeds, things tend to slow down. It's like another thing with time that's kind of counterintuitive is there's no universal present, right? So in time, that's another thing that it's just crazy.
I saw it
And when
yesterday.
you
I was gonna say, I saw yesterday in the news. I don't know if you saw this. The White House has instructed NASA to create a time zone for the moon, because the moon time on the moon actually moves a little bit faster, like 0.5 seconds or something
Yeah,
faster. So they're supposed to they if they're
I
going to
didn't see
have
that.
like if they're going to be having lunar missions coming up again, it's critical to like the mathematics for like hitting your target. So the moon's going to get its own time zone. So I thought that was pretty cool. I saw the headline. I'm like,
Yeah,
what the hell? Yeah,
satellites in orbit of us, the time moves a little differently there, so they have to synchronize the clocks for our GPS differently. I think I
yeah.
think they move slower. Yeah, so
Yeah,
that's
they
another
they they have
point to
they
make
have
there.
to be calibrated. One for their speed, and two for the time delay back and forth. So they're actually calibrated to. I saw that was in Star Trek. Neil deGrasse Tyson was talking about that on Star Talk, about how we have to calibrate the GPS to accommodate that, so that you're actually accurate.
All right. And you got to think about God. Like if you think about so many issues with that concept, hypothesis, you could talk about it for days. But like one thing is, if you say God, okay, created things, who or what God, right? Because you're trying to explain complexity with more complexity and a mystery with a bigger mystery. And Occam's razor, you're adding more elements to your theory, which makes your theory less probable. The more things you add, and it's ontologically expensive, as they say, to keep adding things, to your theory or your picture. But I mean, really, everything about God is the same with the universe. You're just kind of transferring and exchanging questions. Like, you say God existed forever. The universe could have existed forever. We know the universe exists. It's simpler than God has to be. And, everything we've come to discover is the horses won every race is naturalism. Not to say there might be something out there, right? But, everything we have to go out, start where we're at, what we know, and everything we know for hundreds of years, right? It's leaned toward naturalism. But, yeah, it's just God exists forever. The universe exists. Universe can't come from nothing. Well, why does the universe exist? Why does this God exist? I think it's ridiculous that some dude was just there, like somewhere, bored forever, and then made this experiment to lord over and play hide and seek with. Basically, I doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah,
Maybe it
you
does
mentioned
to some people.
you held up the book on time, and we all know the Hawking book, Brief History of Time. Hawking has another book called
Right.
The Grand Design, where he talks about the
Heard
fact
that. Yeah.
we don't need a god to create the universe. Like nature abhors a vacuum, the energy, energy and matter will just spontaneously convert like energy to matter, matter to energy. There's no need to invoke a god, just this the physics of nature. But then the theists will turn around and say, "Well, who fine-tuned the universe?" Well, that's we know that's a bullshit argument. And Ben Shapiro's being raked over the coals right now for his bullshit regarding like condemning atheism and the fine-tuning argument. But I can't stand Ben Shapiro. I don't watch any of his
Isn't that just
videos.
Ben Shapiro's? Yeah, I've seen some like the Daily Wire or whatever. Isn't that kind of Ben Shapiro's perpetual state of being raked over the coals or whatever you said? I mean,
Yeah,
he
yeah,
did a debate
it's
with Alex O'Connor that was fascinating. Yeah.
yeah. I don't watch his stuff because one, it's a waste of time, and two, I don't want to give him the views. So, but like I've seen other channels who are deconstructing his arguments. I was watching one this afternoon on rationality rules. Excuse me.
It's a good channel.
That was interesting, the way they took him down. So, but I can't stand Ben Shapiro. He's such a blowhard.
He reminds me of Dinesh D'Souza a little bit in that he talks so fast. I rewatched the debate he did with Sean Carroll that's very old, and he was talking about like the guy asked a question and he was like, you know, people knew this guy named Bill and 5% of the people didn't know Bill. Like, who would you believe? And I'm like, this is like a false analogy. This is a category error. Like, it's not the same thing, like at all. There's so many points you can make about fine tuning is another thing. There's so many things to say about fine tuning. I can't even really get into that on this. That they're just from the get go. They just don't add up. But, wait, but Jason, moving to our last topic here, free will. Um, I read a book called Determined by Robert Sapolsky. I have Sam Harris's book also on free. Pretty compelling cases that somebody like Sean Carroll will say, the fundamental laws of physics, the fundamental level, which is just quantum field theory, quantum fields, there is no cause, there is no arrow of time, or direction of time, but there's things that are emergent. So it makes sense to say on human levels, we have free will, even if, which kind of doesn't really kind of make sense and is true, but it also kind of doesn't address the issue in a way. But like we can't be like Laplace's demon that can now that we'd be able to predict exactly what's going to happen. So like that's one way to look at it, I guess, on the human level scale, right? We can say that. But Sapolsky, to me, it was like the best, most comprehensive book I've read arguing against free will. And I think compatibilists like Daniel Dennett will say like, even if all these things are determined and we're not really the conscious of us, so we can still say it's us, right? But that's kind of like avoiding what people mean when they say we have free will. So Sapolsky points out like your actions and your intentions are determined by a continuous string of causes that you had no that you weren't really responsible for. And there's no kind of like magic will in the middle there, or separate from physics, separate from that chain of causation that you can say it's just this magical free will. Like we have will and we make decisions and they matter, but and there can be change, we can be changed. But like when you start thinking about, obviously your culture, your time, your genetics, your upbringing, but also like, the things that happened to you a minute ago, an hour ago, so many microscopic things going on subconsciously. Like every like, why were you motivated today and you weren't yesterday? Do you know? Can you control that? So you can have like a strong like willpower, right? And work ethic, but are you responsible for being the type of person that has that? You can try to. Are you responsible for like not noticing something or not being exposed to a certain thing that might have helped you? I mean, there's just so many things that I'm like, it's a pretty convincing case. But what do you think about it?
I haven't studied it a lot. Like I know there's been scientific studies that show, that our brain is making a decision, like some motor decision before we're even conscious of it. So I'm aware
Yeah,
of
yeah.
those arguments. But I mean, like if we don't have free will, then what do we have? I mean, in my thinking, yes, maybe our brains are firing a nanosecond before we're conscious of it. But in my way of putting that together, there's a predecessor. Like, you're already thinking like several steps ahead. So if you're thinking several steps ahead, then to my mind, that would explain why your brain is like activating like split seconds before we're actually conscious of it. But I'm not a neuroscientist, so I can't speak to that with any sort of authority. But I I mean, it doesn't
It's complicated.
intuitively it doesn't intuitively make sense that we don't have free will. But maybe that's the great conundrum. Like, like why do we have the illusion of free will, which is interesting. It's actually something I was thinking of yesterday.
Well, time
In
is not really real, then you like you can't be surprised if anything is not really fundamentally there. So,
Yeah, as I was remembering yesterday, I was chatting with a friend. We were discussing Buddhism, um, and the backstory of Buddha, like how he was like supposedly the son of a king who saw suffering and went off into the world. And like his origin story shows up hundreds of years later. It's very similar to Christianity, like, the stories of Jesus that come out. Um, the that this Buddha's backstory it's all completely made up hundreds of years later. But and I don't know how accurate I am with this, but in this Buddha's backstory, his mother's name is Maya. Well, in Hinduism, Maya is illusion. So is there a connection here between the people who wrote the story of Buddha's early days? Are they bringing this Hindu element of Maya being the illusion that we all, like the world we live in is an illusion, which is kind of a particularly interesting aspect of Hinduism that I actually learned it. I never, there's certain lessons you just never forget. So I took astronomy as an elective, but I also took world religions as an elective in school. And that's one of the stories I never forgot from Hinduism, is that in one version of one of the Hindu god, like, there's a myriad of gods, and there's like three main gods: Vishnu, Shiva, and Brahma. Um, but that
um,
basically the world we live in is the dream of Brahma, and Maya is sort of the conduit of the illusion. So maybe that's where this free will comes in. Like, maybe all of life in consciousness is just an illusion, the way the Hindus describe it. You know, maybe
it's
we're
getting
all
into like
God's dream.
idealism. Yeah, that's getting into like idealism and like hard solipsism, maybe. But I mean, everything that the external world exists, everything we can do, confirms that. If you want to step back and say like the only thing we can be sure of is there seems to be some kind of experience going on. Yeah, you can say that, but like, I mean, you can't live that way. You have to live as if the world is real. And something is real. I mean, some kind of experience is going on of some kind. You can at least say that. But everything that we do experience kind of shows that the real world is real. At least we have a pretty good, understanding of it as evidenced by free will. Like you think about like quantum physics and chance, but chance doesn't say free will. But something that does kind of make me pause is, again, I mentioned cause, like because cause is not fundamental in physics, but I was just talking about how we have this continuous chain of causes. So if we can't prove cause and cause is not fundamental, we could pose a question mark there, I guess, on that question of free will. Um, but Sapolsky also, again, he mentions change does happen. We can change for the better. And when you look at like history, when we take away like burning witches and laying blame for people and understanding that, you know, like having a criminal justice system, for example, that takes into account all of these things, and it's not based on like retribution and emotion and getting revenge, as understandable as that often is. And we focus on reform, and you still got to lock people up. They're going to hurt people, obviously, but it can make things more humane. Um, and I think there's a good, point to be made there as well, to consider.
Yeah, I had
Um,
on the so I'm also for your viewers, I'm the host for the Atheist Alliance International podcast, and a few months ago I had Dr. Susan Blackmore on, and we were discussing
mm,
consciousness, and she was saying like, if and forgive me if I misquote her, but from what I recall, the way I phrased it and asked her to confirm is consciousness is basically the filter by which we interpret the stimuli we're receiving from the external world, but it doesn't necessarily make it true because like we have our own biases, our own experiences that sort of alter and shape
mm,
those perceptions that we're having. But consciousness in and of itself is basically just the filter by how we can relate to the stimuli from the world.
right. Well, we have things like science to help us get. It's kind of the job of science to help us not fool ourselves. But yeah, we always see the world through some type of you know personal, I guess, whatever. Guess that's true. But yeah, topics, and I, have been reading up on a lot of those. I would definitely recommend anybody check out those books I mentioned, The Big Picture by Carroll, and then Determined by Sapolsky, and The Order of Time by Rovelli. And yeah, people can check out your channel, The Sylvester Report. Um, I'll leave a link. My channel hasn't grown in a while, and I haven't been active on it, but some people watch it. It's got some subscribers. I think I'm like 200 something. So again, my other channel is way bigger, and music based, and it's definitely important topics to cover. And again, people should check out your stuff, especially if you're like me and you're interested in history, and you connect that with secularism and how important that is, to things going on now in particular. It's definitely something to check out and have knowledge about for sure.
Yeah. I try to
So
keep
yeah,
the videos fairly short. Like I want to keep people's attention. People have short attention spans, so I try to keep the videos short,
yeah,
and interesting. Like I try to like go for like just the key bits. Some videos are more popular than others. Like the Peterson series was obviously more popular because it was controversial. But yeah, I mean, if you like history, then yeah, check it out. So
yeah. Well, Jason, thanks for coming on, man. I still need to learn more editing and all kinds of stuff, to be honest with you. Did I have free will to not more will to want more what I want? To do it. I don't know. Your editing is good, by the way, on your videos.
oh, thanks.
So I guess you picked up some things, got some good knowledge of the programs and stuff, which I
Yeah,
still need to
it,
get into.
it's it takes longer than you'd think. Like even like a 5 minute video can take days to put together because you got to write it, you got to
Uh,
record it, you got to splice it together, and then the time consuming. You got to go find all the imagery to put in it, and get everything. If it was just me talking, like Rationality Rules is basically just him talking, and then he splices in clips from other ones. But like mine, it's just me talking with like examples. So finding video
yeah,
clips, finding stills can be really really time consuming. Even a 5 minute video might take 2 days to do. So
another good new channel, by the way, is Mind Shift. It's with a guy named Brandon. He's bald headed guy. Check that out. He makes a lot of good videos.
it
Um,
sounds
a lot of
familiar.
good stuff out there. Yeah, he's
Yeah,
pretty
that
new.
Yeah, but it sounds familiar. I'm sure I've heard of it, so it's definitely ringing a bell.
Even in some video. But anyway, thanks again for being on, man. And you guys, if you enjoyed, don't forget to like and subscribe. And we'll see you guys later.
Thanks for
Peace.
having me on. Take care, everybody.
Uh, Foresight paradigm, fine. A foresight paradigm, foresight paradigm, you fine. A foresight paradigm, I fight for sight.